We're still at Cloud Expo on the first day. This is Roger Struckhoff with Cloud Expo TV, and right now we're joined by David Linthicum. If you don't know who this is, you should. He's been with Deloitte now. He says for 9 months. He's been around for a long time. Not to make any cast any aspersions or anything like that. Writes a lot, speaks a lot. He's going to speak here tomorrow, and he's always right there in the edge of the wave to tell you what's going on. So anyway, David, thanks for joining us. You want to talk about serverless tomorrow, so let's talk about serverless today. What are you going to talk about?
Well, it's really the importance of serverless as it relates to kind of the expansion of cloud computing. And so in other words, a lot of limitations been placed on cloud computing over the years because we had to, in essence, bind how our applications and our databases to provisioning servers within the cloud computing infrastructure. And what some of the public cloud providers, including AWS, Microsoft, and Google, have done is basically removed the limitations and the fact that we have to provision everything. And so when serverless means that we're actually still have servers, but the thing is the server provisioning is automated. So in other words, as we write applications and as we write different database procedures, as we deploy workloads, we're in essence decoupling ourselves from having to deal with the infrastructure. So it's able to analyze what we're able to do, how we're building applications, the behavior of those applications, and allocate just the exact amount of servers that we need for those systems. And that's the power of it. And it provides us with the capability of, in essence, removing ourselves or abstracting ourselves from the complexity of dealing with infrastructure.
Okay, now when I think of serverless, I think of event-driven. I think of little data packs coming in along in IoT deployments. I think of measuring the service provided by the serverless in seconds. I have a feeling that's maybe too narrow a focus for the long term.
Well, the term serverless semantically is always a little bit confusing because you still have servers that you're dealing with, but ultimately this is about the ability to kind of take infrastructure as a service computing to the next level. So within the PaaS platforms for the last several years, we've had the ability to have the PaaS platforms automatically allocate the server resources we need and basically the memory resources we need and the storage resources we need to kind of support the application workloads that we're leveraging. And ultimately going forward, the ability to leverage these technologies such as AWS Lambda, Microsoft Functions to, in essence, provide simplicity for how we deploy and build these systems is the step in the right direction. So it's removing the complexity from having to deal with it. It provides developers with the capability of just thinking about what they're building without having to focus on the infrastructure. And it's really kind of the next generation of how we're building these applications.
I think of two circles, and I always forget if that's Boolean or a Venn diagram or both, but I get the two circles and I see DevOps and I see serverless, and I don't want to imply that like they're one and the same thing, but there must be a close proximity. I guess what I'm trying to say is that how do serverless and DevOps mix, and does it behoove DevOps people to move to serverless or the other way around? I don't want to scare DevOps people off, but on the other hand, when you're starting to get the performance I think it's promised, it looks like it's becoming even more of an imperative to move towards this DevOps culture.
Yeah, the reality is that serverless enhances DevOps. They're not in competition. So ultimately, if we're a developer, we're thinking about the infrastructure of code or basically defining the infrastructure we need to support the applications. This removes that step. So what we're doing is still writing the application, we're still binding it to a database, and we're letting the cloud system, in essence, determine the servers that we need to get in place for storage and compute services to support the application workload. So when you're dealing with DevOps, it's about speed, it's about agility, it's about the ability to deploy very quickly. Serverless, in essence, removes a step. So we no longer do we have to think about infrastructure, no longer do we think about how much storage we need, and then misallocating infrastructure all the time. One of the first times when I leveraged cloud computing and I was building systems in the cloud, I would always misallocate the resources I needed. And the workload would fail. And it was just dumb mistakes that I was making. And so this removes humans from having to make that distinction. And by the way, it's deeply integrated with the DevOps technologies that you find in the cloud, the tool chains that you find within the enterprise, and allows us to, in essence, become a little bit faster, better at building these applications, and speed to deployment is enhanced as well.
Also, what I'm thinking, you write a lot about organizations understanding what's going on. So you can convince techies that they need to do this. You can convince operations people they need to do this. At the very high levels of the enterprise, how important is it they know about serverless, and what should they know? What's the best way to get them to learn it at a level that that works, so they understand it sufficiently or believe in it sufficiently to deploy it?
Well, every cloud architect should have an understanding what serverless computing is capable of doing. Just basically another tool within the arsenal where you're able to go off and build applications quicker. So it's not necessarily something that's strategic. I look at serverless as something that's fairly tactical. In other words, it enhances the existing way in which we build and deploy applications. Okay. It's not necessarily magic. It's basically the ability to drive development in different ways that we've done in the past by removing some of the steps we're typically doing. If you look at traditional cloud computing, it's not unlike putting servers within a data center, except we do it virtually. So we have to configure our systems, including compute and storage, memory utilization, middleware utilization, data integration, all these things that basically take server resources, and we have to make a guess in terms of what the configuration has to be, how big those instances need to be, how much compute power, how much they're going to cost. All these things are basically up to us as human beings to figure out. But cloud computing really kind of is something that needs to be a bit more turnkey. In other words, if we're virtualizing these systems, we're having to make these humanistic decisions in terms of how we're building and configuring our infrastructure. That's going to remove the value of cloud computing, because guess what? We're going to make mistakes. We're going to allocate too much storage, allocate too much memory, allocate too much CPU, or we're going to under-allocate it and the systems are going to fail. So why not just basically allocate exactly what we need, use what we need, and then return those resources to the pool?
Okay, and let's do a quick review of the big three and what they're doing in serverless and where they are today, and if you have any opinion where they might be tomorrow.
Yeah, AWS led serverless with Lambda, and I think that's basically the standard in terms of how people look at serverless technology. And coming up on reInvent, that's going to be in a few weeks. They're going to announce different serverless technologies. That's my prediction, not necessarily what AWS is actually doing, but I think we're going to see a lot of serverless kind of terms and concepts coming forward. Microsoft following close second with functions in terms of their capability of building these various systems, and they're very enhancing the capabilities, in essence, holding their position in the market, and they're doing very well. And then Google, with their serverless capabilities, basically working around the Kubernetes technology, working around the container-based technology, and thinking differently about what they're able to do based on the niche they're able to have in the business. And so all three basically have the capabilities, the ability to basically provide different solutions within the marketplaces, different kind of ecosystems around those things. You have the biggest, which is AWS, second, which is Microsoft, and third, which is Google, but they all do amazing things with serverless technology, so keep an eye on all three companies.
All right, so we've been joined here for a few minutes by David Linthicum with Deloitte. If you're watching this live, watch him live tomorrow. He's going to be on our live stream at 2 p.m., right?
2 p.m.
2 p.m. Eastern Time. If you're watching this live and you're in the New York area or anywhere reasonably close, get over here and watch them. If you're watching this on the YouTube channel, thank you very much for doing it. You know David. Now you know a little bit more where he's thinking with serverless. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for watching. For Cloud Expo TV, this is Roger Struckoff. And we're still live, but it's cool. Thanks, everyone.